So to honor everyone's time, I think I will get started with introductions. Does that sound good? Great. So, hi, my name is Sharon Finley. I am in Asheville, North Carolina with Red Oak Recovery Programs, and I'm excited to introduce Lynn Wadsworth and Dr. Mike Hinckley. Lynn Wadsworth is the Director of Clinical Services for all Red Oak Recovery Programs. Lynn uses she, her pronouns. Lynn is a master's level clinician who is duly licensed in the state of North Carolina as a professional counselor and an addiction specialist. She has held a variety of leadership roles throughout her clinical career, including case manager supervisor in the field of HIV/AIDS, program manager in an intensive outpatient program, director of substance abuse in 2 different residential programs, and director of clinical services for several programs. Dr. Mike Hinckley is the founder and executive director of Wildwood Farm and is a psychotherapist specializing in the treatment of addiction and co-occurring disorders. Dr. Hinckley uses he, him pronouns. Dr. Hinckley's professional training is a unique combination of psychotherapy, spiritual guidance, and personal development. He lectures widely on the topic of LGBTQI+ community and addiction treatment. He served as a parish priest for 20 years while being a healthcare ethicist. Dr. Hinckley's educational background includes studies at the College of the Holy Cross, Middlebury College, Catholic University, Georgetown University, Yale University, and many others. Early in his career, he worked with Mother Teresa of Calcutta in both Rome and Washington, D.C., serving the needs of men with HIV/AIDS, many of whom were IV drug users and unable to access the medical healthcare system due to the fear and prejudice of the health epidemic. Today, he dedicates his efforts to treating clients with chronic addiction and co-occurring disorders. And now this passion is specifically directed toward the LGBTQI+ person suffering from addiction. So with that, I will share my screen and let us get started. And Lynn is going to kick things off.
Yeah. Are you ready for me to start?
I am. It's just taking a sec.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. A couple of things I want to say. Someone seems to be weed eating just outside my house, my next door neighbor, so I apologize if it's noisy, first of all. Secondly, I've had a funny little allergy thing going on in my throat, and so you might hear me cough a little bit, and I apologize for that too. After listening to Dr. Mike's bio, I feel very privileged to be able to present with him. Thank you. And I hope that I'm up to the task to be in the same presentation with him. I am going to talk to you about attachment and about attachment wounds and attachment healing. And they're going to talk about it, I think, primarily because what we see show up in our treatment programs is folks who have significant attachment wounding and families that can benefit from a lot of healing in the realm of attachment. So I always like to start these presentations asking folks to reflect for a minute or two on what you wish you'd gotten more of from your parents or what you wish you had gotten different from them. Do you wish they had done more of or less of or just differently? And what are some ways that you did feel affirmed by them? Because that's essentially what we're talking about when we talk about attachment. We're talking about the quality of the relationship with your primary caregivers, whoever that was. And if you want to just put 1 or 2 word reflections in the chat box, that would be awesome to hear and see what folks have to say as they reflect on this. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes.
Lynn, would you like me to read some of them as they come in?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. So everyone
Okay.
can. Yes.
Unprotected, cold and distant, rewards. My mom was a motivator and dad was more laid back. Parents encouraged my interest as a younger child. I wish I was more appreciated for who I am, not who I was imagined to be. Time with just me, getting to know me more than just one of their children. Wounded, in examples include body comments, masculinity comments. Affirmed comments include interests in music and art. More physical touching. Learned caregiving at a very early age. Lots of really insightful responses.
Thanks so much, everyone. This is really it's so helpful, and I think it's always a nice way to get started talking about attachment because it helps all of us drop into our own story and our own experience in the realm of attachment, even if we don't assign that language to it. What we're talking about is the quality of our attachment relationship with our primary caregivers. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Sharon. This is a very short video that illustrates really a quality of connection and also what happens when the connection gets broken, which is also the piece that we're really talking about when we're talking about treatment. We're talking about the sort of break or rupture or wounding in attachment. And so this is a nice little illustration. We'll show this. Hopefully the sound is good and all that, but go ahead with that. I don't think there's any sound, Sharon.
Can you hear it now after I mute myself?
No.
Let me try one thing. Are you still able to see my screen?
Yes.
No. Okay. Let me try doing it this way instead. Is this any better? Sound?
I don't know. Click start it. Let me see.
I did. It might not be showing on yours.
No. So, and I don't think we need to spend a lot of time trying to get the
Okay.
sound. So what I can do is really talk you guys through it. And it's more important to watch the visuals anyway in this video. So do you want to go ahead and we'll just do it that way?
Okay. Yep.
Tom is saying sharing audio with shared content. I'm sure you're trying some of those things. Okay, so we're going to do it without the sound. So if you want to just stop it for a sec, Sharon, let me just set it up. Basically, what you're going to see is this is Edtronic and does a lot of work with infants and social engagement. And he's not saying the word attachment. He's not talking about attachment. He is talking about attachment, but he's not using that term. But essentially, what is happening in this video is there's a mother and a child who are engaging, and it's this really sweet, kind of nurturing, fun little experience of engagement between the mother and the child. And then they have the mother kind of turn back and turn back around to the baby with just a flat face, like no affect. You know, it's called the still face. So that the baby essentially recognizes the mom is now not interacting and not available, not responsive, not attentive. And so what you're watching is the reactions and the what we consider the strategies of the baby. So we'll watch it and just watch the reactions of the baby and the strategies that the baby uses.
Lynn, if you'd like, I can say what he's saying.
Yeah, sure.
So they're greeting each other and they're exchanging information. And then they ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she's using all of her abilities to try to get the mother back. She smiles. She points because she's used to the mom looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and is kind of crying a little bit and is trying to say, what's happening here? She's making a screeching sound at the mother, saying, come on, why aren't we doing this? What's going on? And in just 2 minutes, when they're not getting the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions and turn away and are feeling the stress of it. She's losing control of her posture because of the stress of the experience. And now she's crying. I realize you can't hear it, but. And now the mom is responding positively. He's saying it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is the normal stuff that goes on that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. We stop the still face and the baby can come back from it. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance for the child to come back to the good, and they get stuck in that ugly situation.
Thanks, Sharon. That's great having a narration. I love it. So I think I saw someone, Andrea, commented, I've seen this many times and it always makes me really sad. I think, a lot of times when we show it to parents, they have a really hard time watching it. The thing, I've also watched it 100 times, and a lot of us have in the field. So, yeah, I apologize if a lot of this is information you already know. Sometimes, you kind of have to give the foundation because there are always some folks who don't have all this information. But the thing that always strikes me when I watch this video is how quickly the infant picks up on the fact that the mom is no longer engaged. So that's sort of the most poignant part as a parent myself and as a child of parents. Just, the extreme kind of how we all know this. We pick up on it instantly when someone disengages from us or detaches from us, or there's a rupture. We feel it immediately. And here's an infant that illustrates it so well, because the infant can't really say, a whole lot, like, what are you doing, mom? Why are you doing that? What's going on? But you can see it all over the infant's face. And then the strategies that the infant uses to get the mom back into connection are everything the infant has available to them. And the thing that I like to talk about is many of us are working with older teenagers, young adults, or even older adults. And so if you can transfer that infant's response to whatever population you're working with, you will see those same attachment strategies going on, not just with their family, but with all of their current relationships as well. Because that's what we learn when we're really young. The way to get someone to connect with me is to do whatever that strategy is. And we keep doing it over and over and over, even if it's a really unhealthy strategy and it creates more problems. Things like, you might know someone who's a real pleaser. So they're always going to agree with people and always be a pleaser, because it's in their mind, their image of other is that I have to be agreeable and do what this person wants and kind of defer to this person in order to keep them connected to me. And we all know that that can have devastating effects for a lot of folks, especially teenagers who are followers and all. So you can go to the next slide, Sharon. But I think, the big takeaway there is to know that this is not just a situation that happens in infancy. In the early days, Bolby was talking about, the first 3 years of life, and we still talk about that when we talk about attachment theory. But these attachment ruptures and difficulties continue throughout the lifespan. And certainly throughout the first, 15, 16, 17 years, when we're so dependent on whoever our caregiver is, we are dependent on their availability to us physically and emotionally. So it's just I'm going to go through this quickly because we have only a short period of time. So I apologize if I go too fast for some folks. John Bolby is considered the father of attachment theory. Mary Ainsworth worked with him. She doesn't get as much credit. They use an experiment called the strange situation to understand the different attachment styles that we have. We all have some attachment style, which is essentially what describes our attachment behaviors to get connection with people when we have a rupture. And there's secure style, there's an insecure styles, a couple of them, and then there's a disorganized style. You can switch to the next one, Sharon. Go ahead. I'm not going to belabor these basic points. What is attachment? Attachment is a lot of things, but it is really, if you want to boil it down to attunement, which means I get you. I'm trying to really connect with you. I'm trying to understand you. Presence. We have to really offer our presence to be able to attune to someone. Having an interest in them, a true interest in them, and creating safety, emotional and physical. And what we see a lot of is the lack of emotional safety. And we also see the lack of physical safety, but we really see a lot of the lack of emotional safety, meaning it's not okay to just be who I am. I don't feel that I can be understood or accepted or loved for who I am. I don't get enough nurturing or attentiveness. Yeah, and so the central theme is that primary caregivers who are available and responsive to a child's needs, an infant or child, allow the child to develop a sense of security when we know that that person is dependable and reliably dependable, and we know we're going to get something that really nurtures us and feels us. It creates secure attachment. Go ahead and switch to the next one, Sharon. The styles are secure. There are a couple of insecure styles that we talk about, avoidant and anxious. There's more language and information around those. If anyone is not familiar with that, you might want to Google it and look at all the different attachment styles. And then there's a disorganized style, which is exactly what it says, which is disorganized. So you're going to see a little bit of all of the different strategies and behaviors going on. And when we work in attachment, and those of us who are working in the treatment field are always working in attachment because the folks showing up in our programs have attachment wounds and ruptures and traumas. And it's part of what leads them to have some of the mental health issues and substance use issues that they're struggling with. So we're not looking as much at attachment styles as we are at attachment strategies. We want to understand that when this person acts in this way toward their peers or toward staff, that this is what's going on. They are actually trying to gain a sense of security and a secure attachment, or they're trying to protect themselves because they don't believe they can have secure attachment. We all will spend a lot of time protecting ourselves also. Okay, switch to the next one, Sharon. Yeah, signs of secure attachment. There are all kinds of signs, but this is really brief. Confident that the caregiver will meet their emotional and physical needs. Using the attachment figure as a secure base. You can watch toddlers do this all day long. Kind of, keep looking up at the mom or dad and then go do their whatever they're doing, then keep looking back, or they keep coming back to the room where the parent is. And then seeking that attachment figure in times of distress. And if that attachment figure is not predictable and reliable and responsive, and you're 15 years old and you're in distress, particularly in the context that we're talking about today, if you are beginning to, identify your sort of sexual orientation or gender identity or whatever that information is that's going on for you as a teenager, young, preteen, teenager, whatever, and your attachment figure is not available and responsive, you are often left alone, and it can be really traumatizing to not have someone that you feel accepts you and understands you and can respond to what you're going through in a way that's helpful. Okay, flip the next one, Sharon. I think the next slide is just a little illustration of this, that what we call the circle of security, which is a methodology that's used for young children. It's a treatment methodology. Basically, I need you to support my exploration, not just as a 2-year-old, but also as a 16-year-old. I might have to explore what my beliefs are, or where I fit in the world, or who I love, or whatever that thing is. We see it with all kinds of, religion, sexual orientation, career choices, friend choices, all those kinds of things that parents have a difficult time sometimes supporting that. They're fearful or they don't understand or they're just rejecting and, judgmental. But you can see the baby in here is welcome my coming to you, protect me, comfort me. So those are all the things that we're looking for with our attachment figure. Okay, next slide.
And we're close
Great.
to about halfway.
Okay. So there's a concept called intersubjectivity, which is this idea of sharing emotion or attunement. When Ed Tronick, the piece you didn't hear, is that what he says in the beginning of that video is that they are working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, which means that there is this coordination of understanding. And I think we are all looking for that. It's part of the human biology to look for that when we're young. A lot of times we don't get it or we don't get enough of it. And so we're still looking for it throughout our lifetime. And what intersubjectivity is this sense of feeling gotten. Like I get you. I understand what's going on with you. I get what you're feeling. Or even if I don't quite get it, I'm working hard to get it. But that's what intersubjectivity is. And many of us did not have that with our parents. And again, that's a continuum. So maybe some of us got a little bit of it, but not a lot of it. And maybe some of us didn't get any. And then maybe some of us did get a lot of it. But it's it's the piece that helps a child feel completely secure within their own internal system. And that internal system is also what begins to impact their choices of how they take care of themselves, which are sometimes really unhealthy choices. Okay, next.
Lynn, Todd in the chat just said, just to share, in my work as a grief therapist, I'm finding how important it is to address attachment, especially for disenfranchised persons.
It makes so much sense. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, so much sense. I think it's really, when you start looking through this lens at your clients, you know that you're always going to come back to this work with them because it's a universal experience for us as humans. So attachment ruptures, there are all kinds of ruptures that happen along the way. A child may have a lot of sort of secure attachment as a small child, an infant, a toddler. But then things happen and our families, things happen to us that can create what we call ruptures or even traumas. Divorce is an example of an attachment trauma for some kids, not for every kid, but some. But any kind of neglect, emotional, physical neglect, abuse, parent addiction, significant illness in the parent where they're not really available and responsive, rejection of the child based on gender or sexual orientation. I mean, I'm sure, Dr. Mike's going to talk a lot about that. And I mean, that is just, when you look at the number of statistics of homeless youth who are LGBTQ and just, the level of suicidality and all of those things, really, you're looking at someone who did not have secure attachment with their attachment figures, who didn't feel accepted and understood. So it's a critical piece of the work. Okay, next slide. Yeah, and can it be repaired? Yes, this is the good news. It can be. You have to have willing participants. And we work at Red Oak, we work with parents to repair attachment wounds and attachment ruptures. And can be a long and very slow, graceful kind of process with parents. Often they don't understand it in the beginning and then they're resistant because it's hard to look at yourself. It's hard for parents to grieve their own regrets of what they didn't do. And so we do a lot of very intentional work with parents to help them reach the part where they can recognize the places where they created wounds and we begin to coach them on how to repair that. That's a best case scenario. Obviously, it doesn't happen with every family, but I will say in our work, it does happen with a high percentage of our families. And so we've spent, 7 years specifically trying to get better and better at this particular piece of work. And those are some of the things that we do. If anyone's interested in other strategies and ideas, feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about that. And then I think it's the last slide maybe is Daniel Hughes, who is an attachment psychotherapist and expert. He's written a couple of books. I recommend those. He's very useful as a resource. And he uses the acronym of PLACE when you talk about creating what we call earned secure attachment, which is you don't have secure attachment, but we're going to work to create secure attachment with parent and child because it's going to help the child heal all those places that where they're struggling. And he uses the acronym of PLACE, and basically it's, P is play, some kind of play between the parent and child. L is love. A is acceptance. I think that's a big piece that we're probably talking about here. C is curiosity, not just accepting who your child is, but be curious about who they are, how they think, where they are in the world, and what their thoughts are. And E, empathy. And one of the things that we say at Red Oak is that empathy is always the right choice. Doesn't matter what the situation is, empathy is always the right choice. Even if your child is making you feel crazy and is screaming at you, empathy is still the right choice. So yeah, so you're not going to go wrong if you can find empathy within yourself to help to connect with your child and what they're going through. So I think, is that it, Sharon? I think that's the last slide for me. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And I know that that went quickly. Benefits of earned secure attachment, all of these improvement in self-esteem and self-confidence, all of, we think about the relationship with the parent, but really the true benefit is what happens in the healing in the child. And when we can help parents understand that this is the reason we're doing it, we want you guys to have a great relationship, yes, but more importantly, we want you to use what you have to help heal your child. And you do hold some of the keys to that if we can get you there. So there you go. I think I'm gonna stop there because I think the time is kind of up. And again, folks are welcome to reach out to me or anyone at Red Oak to talk about this if you have any questions or want to talk further about it. Perfect.
Great. What we want to take some time now to talk about family systems and work with the LGBT community. My objectives are going to provide a little bit of an insight to the implementation tools that integrate specific tools that SAMHSA is asking for with the LGBT community, define and explain some queer normative understandings. And that's specifically what our specialty is. We are one of the few, if the only, program that is working with what we call and trademarked as queer normative. And that is an environment that's created specifically to address the LGBTQ person, and so that they can have the experience of that they are the norm and that they are in a situation where they can just be rigorously honest with themselves, their addiction, and also their family. Understand the family experience of the queer person and developing queer resilience in the family system. I know we have a limited amount of time, so I'll simply say about the queer normative environment. It's basically the experience as if you were a black sheep among all white sheep in the pasture. The white sheep, dominate, and the black sheep sticks out. And we all have that saying, the black sheep of the family. But what if everybody was the black sheep? Now you don't stand out. That's the point of queer normative, where you can have a therapeutic group where it's okay to talk about attempted suicide, because 40% of our clients have not only attempted, but have attempted multiple times. And when you look at the statistics that Lynn mentioned before, you look at the trans community, 40% of the homeless who are teenagers are queer people. And of that population, the teens who are queer, again, 40% of them will attempt suicide. These numbers are astounding. So how do we make a change here? Well, we have to talk about systems. We have to talk about the individual in relationship to themselves. The one thing that so many people forget about the queer person is that from the time of our birth and our identity and our understanding in relationship to other people, there is something fundamentally different or wrong. And what is probably the most common thing I hear in my office is there was a period of time that I didn't know what the problem was. And then I heard the word gay and it fit, or I heard the word trans and it fit. So the person has a quandary before an identity. And that's a very complicated place to be. So if you want to find a common denominator among those black sheep, you're going to find that I'm a gay man myself. You're going to find that the queer person has had a life of knowing how to be invisible, how to be careful, how not to hold the hand of someone they care about or talk too loud in the lunchroom. There is some degree, even for the most out and about queer person, there is a degree of knowing how to hide, and it's significant. Now, when you talk about family systems and you talk about addiction treatment, this is a variable that is almost indescribable, that you're working with someone who knows how to hide from you and probably does it in a way that many clinicians can't even catch the gravity of this. Well, how this plays out, just to get to this one point and make it so articulate, is to say that look at the relapse rate and the high utilization of the queer community of the recovery industry. They are among the highest. The relapse rates are far above and higher than the general population, and the utilization is usually by the point that someone comes to Wildwood. They have spent most of what the family's resources are, and if not, have them on credit cards, So we work with people who have really used the system, easy to say, 8 different treatment episodes. We've had one client who had been over 15 episodes. And then they come to Wildwood and everything changes, because as soon as they step on the property, wait a minute now, this feels different. And why is that important? Well, I don't know if any of you remember, but a number of years, Sally Fields got an Oscar. And it was for Best Actress, and it was voted on by her peers. And it was a revelation, and she points it to as a change in her life, where she got up there and the little speech she gave was simply, "You really do like me. You like me, and I thank you for liking me." She had a very intense personal experience of saying what all of us have inside. I want to be liked. I want to be okay. I want to be assured. I want to be safe. I want to be whole. To have that in a spectacle of the stars, such as her, is a great example for us that every one of these clients that now we know has the propensity for hiding has this inner pull that they also want to be seen. So again, this quagmire, this murkiness in their lives. Now, I'm not going to get into it too detailed because of our time limitations. But for example, if a young gay male comes into your care, you have to think a lot about things that the family is not going to be tuned into, like group sex. We should be thinking every time a gay male, which is very popular, very common, gay male comes into my office and he says meth, I'm going to say, now what's his experience of group sex? Because meth is used as a drug for engagement of these sex parties. And often older men who are lonely and often with addiction issues will prey on younger gay men, and they will supply them drugs, and they will have these parties go on for days, and all kinds of friends will come. So if you take away all of the social norms that allow this behavior within the subculture of the gay community, you can say that this young person has now been exposed to multiple sex parties or multiple sex partners anonymously, and perhaps feeling used and even sexually abused and violated, rape. So now you have all of this bundled up inside a person who knows how to hide and is getting mixed messages from the subculture saying that this is the way that you party. I cannot tell you the devastation this does to someone in their teens. And it happens over and over again. And who are the most vulnerable? Those who don't have money and those who are on the street, because this all happens through social media. They have bylines and little ways of communicating with one another to get these messages out. Addicted to meth, they're going to be missing for days at a time. And the parents are going to simply say, my kid disappears and doesn't communicate. Well, let me tell you what's going on. So how do you take this amount of real trauma and emotional isolation, wrap addiction in it, something as addictive as meth, and now you're going to try to work on a dysfunctional family that has attachment issues that wasn't in a connection with this child before they started. Now the person is 23 years old and has been doing meth for 3 years. Tremendous amount of work. What I'd like to footnote here, and please, I accept questions as we go. A footnote I'd like to make here, and I believe we've talked about it at Red Oak, who we partner with quite a bit, is that sometimes the family work needs to hold off with the queer population as a sense of family work involving the patient, the primary client. What can happen is you have the client having individual therapy that's leading towards family work and connecting with the family, but then at the same time you do family work, but it may not be time to bring everybody together. Now, we got those parallels going on. I don't have a third hand, but I'm going to say now there's a third track when working with a queer person, and that's family of choice. This is the family that is probably more emotionally supportive. It's members of and allies of the queer community. So what this person has done is whatever attachments or limitations in the emotional development with the family, they have gone and tried to develop that for themselves in a family of choice. That's what we call it. The family of birth and the family of choice. Now, in this family of choice, you have to do family work too. So in our program, there's a dual family program going on. One may be ready to connect with the other before the other. And in fact, in some cases, forgive me, the dogs have come in. For some of us, we might find that the client isn't ready to connect at all, or that the family of choice is the same as that meth using group.
Dr. Mike, there is, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
There's a question in the chat from Todd. Is it appropriate for me to use terminology such as queer with my clients?
Queer is the preferred word at this time. Sometimes if you have an old geezer like me, someone who is a little older, we grew up with queer being a negative word. Today, queer is the way to refer to anybody who's in the LGBTQ plus community. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. Super, is that good? I hope that helps set the tone. So what are we doing? You know, we've got this 3 tracks going on. We have a person who represses. We have all of this subculture and a norm that is setting a standard of a very, very unhealthy, vulnerable life within a lot of sex-fueled activity. And I gave you the case of a young male. It also could be, for example, a trans female who ends up homeless or ends up in relationships that are one way, and that she ends up having to offer sex in order to keep the relationship going, and all she wants is the relationship. And it's really based on sexuality. And again, that is not a healthy situation that is going to be sustainable. So what is it that we need to do? We need to have that all Black sheep community develop a sexual and gender minority among themselves. And so at Wildwood, what they do is they live together and they eat together as housemates. The farm is not intended to be their world. This is extended sober living. But they're housemates, the place where they come home at the end of the day, the place where they wake up, the place where their downtime is spent, is very much affirming in ways that they've never experienced before. What they're looking for, the person who calls looking for treatment, they're looking for safety. They're looking for a safe place. They're looking for a place that says, just like we experienced with getting the Oscar, the idea of Sally Field saying, "I'm loved." That's safety. I'm loved. If I'm at a AA meeting and someone says an offensive pronoun or an offensive story, many times a client might not put their hand up and say, "This is offensive, this is stupid." But if they're sitting next to a housemate, they might just get a touch on the arm. With you, I'm with you. Man, that's a different world to be in, right? Different world. So what we're talking about here is something that SAMHSA, the federal program for addiction services, is really trying to address. And they have a great thing that you can send for. Just get online and sign up for it, and they will send you their guide, the provider's introduction to substance abuse and treatment for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals. They do not do intersex. It's not absolutely complete. As far as I know, they haven't updated it yet, but I think it's coming. But this is very helpful and does talk through a number of issues. They also, in that program, are the basis of why Wildwood Farm needed to exist. Many programs, and Red Oak would be one of them, would be LGBT sensitive treatment. They'll have a track. They'll have informed clinicians. They'll have the ability to work with a client who's queer. But then above that, for long-term treatment, Wildwood is something that is queer, as opposed to trying to assist and support the queer person through a healing process. This model is a little different, and that's why we collaborate with them. We don't do primary care, so if someone were to call us, we'd get on the phone with Red Oak and say, can you take this client? Because we know that client's going to have safe place there. And that allows the client to get those sophisticated addiction and mental health treatment. Then for the extended care, which we're talking about 5.5 months typically, we have clients like a trans client often can stay a year, and we'll make that happen. But that is a targeted LGBT population, targeted program that's going to be all the black sheep together for the long-term changes that we're hoping to make. Now, that is something a family can't provide, but it's a tremendous tool in working with the families. I want to show you that next. Is that we are going to work on the self. It's just like going back to our model here, where we want to work on the individual, the queer normative. We're going to be working on the family system and the chosen family. And what you do in this extended care is you move from the society and the individual, and you're going to go back and forth, back and forth. So you're going to have a place where you can be nurtured, where you're going to be eating and sleeping, where people are going to identify with you on ways that you don't even have to talk about. They get you. And you go out to your job, you go out to AA, you're interacting with the world, and yet you're doing so with a basis of feeling loved. That's a very new experience for our clients in many ways. The problem is when a person goes from working on themselves and jumps just to the wider world. They are out there and they're going to just try to make their career work right away versus being within a society or a community. That's how the relapse rate gets high. Because, excuse me, the client that we're speaking of in the queer community hasn't had a history of these levels working. So, excuse me, if we haven't had a history of the levels working, why would we presume that they're going to be functioning upon sobriety's initial days and stages? This has to be learned. This is what people say sometimes. You drank for 10 years, so you're 10 years immature. Let's not do that. Let's talk about, because of your social situation, the family situation, there are things that you just didn't learn yet. And that doesn't mean that you can't. You just have to be patient with ourselves. I have to be patient with my client. I have to have that empathy so that the client can work on themselves, go through the stages of family healing, family of choice healing, looking on society and social engagement, whether it's through a 12-step program or getting a part-time job or going back to the job they have, slowly engaging, developing a new group of friends. People, places, and things need to change. That's what this is about. Before I jump back and try to put life back together the way it was. Family systems work. Process is always driven by the client. That's part of the Wildwood method. The client is in charge of when it's time to bring pieces together, and let's engage family and family of choice. We heal what's there and what's broken. We don't go looking for problems. When we're doing this work with the client, you know, the clinician has to be careful that they don't come in with a laundry list. When I work with teams at different treatment centers, I'm very careful to say my prejudice, and I do have them, right? We all do. If you're not in tune with your prejudice, you're You're not fully alive. You're half alive, right? You're not in tune with your darker side. I have prejudice as a gay male. I have prejudice as a white male. I have privileges of a cisgendered white male who comes from the middle class. If I'm not in tune with that, I am going to end up projecting on clients. There is a constant commingling of co-occurring issues, so that there isn't one issue that's the problem. There's a number of issues in satellite, and as we look for the constellation that makes up this person, we have to be able to understand that here, in this time and place, we're safe. We don't have to be overwhelmed by how life has fallen apart, by what's happened to me academically or socially or sexually. I'm safe. That's the first order of business. And then I can move from there on to what feels right to go next. Right? Typically, what I'll say to clients is, if they come in with an active eating disorder, something like that that's imminent and health threatening is something that we want to probably do up front and kind of help them get that stability in their health. The same thing with suicidality. If someone is actively suicidal or has a history of attempting suicide in the recent past, we want to put that up front. But the constellation of other issues pretty much may depend on where the client feels gravitated towards. Sometimes it's not the time to address trauma. Sometimes trauma needs more time to spend away, so that the client can get more sense of their own feet, their own sense of feeling, oh, there's something wrong with the slides here. So one of the things with talking about the family of origin and trying to interconnect treatment with that family is clinging to preconceived ideals. That specifically is one of the biggest issues. And we'll kind of make this kind of our area to loop around and come to conclusion, I think. The family with preconceived notions is going to be projecting onto a person their feelings of what ought to be. And this is often what happens in religion. The person is given a religion and it feels like a lot of ought tos. One of the biggest problems that this may cause in recovery, in reconnecting the family, in keeping sobriety and moving forward, is the fact that tied up in all that is my sense of a higher power. And so if the idea of religion goes out the door, how the heck does the person cling to a higher power? And I'll have clients come all the time to me and say, I'm on step 5, I'm on step 5. And when I ask them to identify the higher power, they have trouble doing it. I think that's one of the big issues right now in 12-step work, is that the spiritual life of the LGBT person is essential for their recovery. We always talk about being fully alive, breathing with both lungs, both with the idea that I am loved and I don't have to drink and drug. You have to have both lungs going. And when the person has that, they now, even though they might be a black sheep, they now have a sense of what's the big motto at Wildwood, is movement from a shame-based identity, moving from shame to pride, having a fundamental pride, a fundamental relationship to a higher power, that I am okay. So let's end there. I think we wanted to do some questions and answers. I'll sign over my slides.
I just put that in the chat. If anyone has any questions, to drop them in here in these last few minutes while we have Lynn and Dr. Mike available. We have a comment from Laura saying, thank you, really interesting.
You must have done a great job, Lynn.
We answered every question they could possibly have.
There's nothing left to talk about. We can all retire.
That's awesome.
Thank you for a great training from Vanessa. Thank you all from Owen. So
Always
lots
a
of kind
pleasure.
words.
It's so nice to have this group come together.
And here is one. I do have a client that identifies as queer, but is married to a cisgender female with children and grandchildren. How do I approach this?
Well, say the structure again. I identify as queer, and I'm married to a cisgendered woman.
The client is queer, cisgendered female with children and grandchildren. How do I approach this?
Okay, so it's a queer family, and what you want to do as clinician, if I were the one behind the door when they knock, would be to start right out with my pronouns are he, him, and what pronouns would you like to go by, and ask them how they identify. After you identify yourself, I would identify myself as a gay cisgendered male. And how would they identify? And they will tell you what next comes. See, again, client-centered, client-normative.
Great. And then the next question comes from Kimberly. What other word or name can I use other than queer?
If it's in the male and female gay community, you can use the word gay, and they will think of that in terms of everybody. But if you use the word gay with members who were not cisgendered, they may feel isolated. So the proper word is queer, or simply member of the LGBTQ community or plus community. Yeah.
And then this next question comes from Vanessa. This may be an odd question, but how do you handle sexual relationships at agency and therapeutic rapport?
We actually ask clients when they come, some have partners, some do not, to not take on any new relationships, no sexuality, no sex between clients, no sex on the property. And if they are interested in engaging with someone who they met and they think is fantastic and the love of their life, the clinician wants to be involved with that, of course, and it becomes an issue of sponsor and sponsee, what's proper for that person's recovery. Again, client normative. Yeah.
And I would add, Dr. Mike, it's similar to us that we're going to work with folks. We're not going to kick them out of the program if they've been sexual. We're going to really work with them on that.
That's right.
Unless we have someone who turns out to be more predatory. And then that's going to be different. I'm sure that's similar for you guys, but
it is. Yeah, that's a good clarification, Lynn. Yeah.
It's rare, but it has happened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, people are people, Yeah.
So I want to honor everyone's time that's an attendee. We have two more questions, Dr. Mike and Lynn, if you have time for them. would you like
No.
me to ask them?
I-
Kara asks, any insights worth working with trans youth population when self-doubt is experienced and he has now considered a de-trans journey quickly after experiencing doubts of his trans experience?
You want to have anything, Lynn, or you want me to go ahead?
Well, I mean, you know, this is not my area of expertise, but what I know from folks I've worked with and talked to and done trainings with is just, I just want to empathize that it's a very complex process, is what I understand. And, you know, I think sometimes there's an expectation on folks that it's more of a linear process of figuring those things out. And I think especially for young people, it's much more like kind of can be all over the place. And the few parents I've worked with, even in my private practice, who are going through this situation, I try to help them understand that because they get confused, you know, that, oh, my child said she was trans, now she says she isn't. And it's like, it's okay, you know, none of that really necessarily means anything yet. You know, just hang with it, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, there's several variables there. The level of identity and the level of maturity. How well does the person know themselves, and how mature are they? And then there is also a societal force, which is also, I could say, a biological force, and that is the earlier someone transitions, the more happy they are with the process. The process is easier. At the same time, if there's an addiction issue, there is reason to slow down with the issue of addiction, because a lot can change in a person once they're sober a year or more.
Thank you for that, both of you. And then a good question to close on. Kimberly asks, where can I get more materials or information about this subject? I'm
going to defer to you, Dr. Michael, now.
Yeah, well, I would say that the SAMHSA book is a great source. If you're with an agency, you can be in touch with Tom Geiger, who's on the screen here. Tom is a resource to people looking for placement. Even if it's not immediately with us, he will place LGBT clients in treatment and also work out an arrangement so that they can come to the farm after treatment. Information about how a clinical team can actually implement what we're talking about. Tom, again, can organize it, and Wildwood would we can do a Zoom training like this specifically for the issues of your agency. And in some cases, we come physically if it's a big program. But as far as other literature, it's really what we're talking about here is pretty cutting edge stuff. There's not a lot of material, and I think the place to look for really good digestible material that you can use would be that SAMHSA book. Wildwood is hoping to produce a Wildwood manual on the method, on different ways of approaching the queer community. So we hope that's coming. And that would be a good answer to your question, that manual.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, we're working on it.
I love it.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I will make sure to include contact information for everyone in that email that's going to go out, as well as a link to the booklets, the information that you were just referencing, Dr. Mike.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Mike and Tom.
Thank you both so much for this.
Always good to be with Red Oak.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, guys. We'll do it again.
Love you all. Bye-bye.
Everyone have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.